And with so much uncertainty around Nigeria's economic outlook, they need to come up with an urgent economic Marshall Plan to lead the nation out of the stormy waters becomes even more expedient. It's a pleasure to have Adefeko, Chairman Industrial Group at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and a member of the Presidential Tax and Fiscal Reforms Committee, also the PRO of NASIMA. He joins us now on Arise Prime Time. Glad to have you join us, Ade.
Thank you for having me.
The World Bank says a growth rate of the economy, 3.2%. A reduction of inflation, they're saying 25%. The FG is saying 15%. One wonders the basis.
Well, you always talk about basis, but in God I trust everything is data. So for them to have arrived at that, there must have been a bit of sequencing, a bit of data collection and data gathering, which spoke to it. So these guys at the World Bank are not particularly what you call lemons, but they don't know what they're doing. So I think an aggregation of data from different sources will have informed that. So I think a school of thought believes that Nigeria should grow at the rate of about 4%, while South Africa should grow at the rate of 8%.
CBN is saying 4 point something.
4.25 is what CBN says, and I think I'm more inclined to agree with CBN because they're the guys who directly superintend about the economy, particularly on the monetary side. So I will say to a large extent, this year portends a very positive trend for the economy. Why do I say so? I say so because in the last 4 months, okay, let's dimension it a bit. I was at the Pricewaterhouse Outlook for 2025, which was on I think on Monday or Tuesday last week. I'm not quite sure of the date. And these panelists all spoke to what we should expect. I'm an incurable optimist, and I know a lot of Nigerians are incurable pessimists, but for me, I am an eternal optimist. And let's look at even the budget for 2025. The budget estimate, because it is a budget estimate until it's passed, because before it becomes a budget, it's an estimate. So 49.74 trillion, okay, that's the estimate. It's called the restoration budget. A lot of people will say, okay, maybe we're talking about hope renewed, as hope being realized, but we are probably believing that hope will be restored this year. That's on a lighter note. So we have 27.5 trillion in 2024. So a quantum leap of about 41.9%. Let's look at the, what we call the sectoral allocations. For 2024, capital expenditure was about 10 trillion. Recurrent was about 8.8 trillion. Debt servicing was about 8.2 trillion. That's a lot. And of course, statutory transfers went to about 1.7 trillion. So for 2025, it is estimated that we will be working with capital expenditure of about 8.7 trillion, capital recurrent of about 9.92, debt servicing again about 8.25. So statutory transfers will be a bit lower on 1.37. My worry here is the debt servicing. And a lot of people always tell me that, Ade, you know what, we cannot afford to default on our debt. I'm not saying we should default on our debt, but we can renegotiate how much we are using to service the debt. That's my problem. If out of this entire figure of 49.74 trillion, you're using 8.25 to service debt, our rate to the debt to GDP ratio is very much on the high side. So technically speaking, we're spending a lot of our monies, which we earn, on debt servicing. So, and who does that? So,
which was the point I was going to raise.
Yes,
13 trillion deficit,
yes.
Debt servicing of 15.8, expected income of 34.82 trillion. Last year, I think it was 14.55. So one is wondering that leap, how feasible?
Well, I will speak to that leap.
Yeah, so how does government intend to, I'm
not batting for government, but I can tell you that the figures are what we see. Don't forget that in the last 1 year, we've had a lot of monies which have been what we call held up or encumbered by a lot of fissures, which is brought about by what you call a bit of engineering, along with what we had in terms of petrodollars or petrol receipts. And that is being freed this year. So we're talking about an amount of between 9 and 10 billion to be freed this year. When I mean freed, a lot of the monies that we're expecting this year will come unencumbered. So the encumbrances for which we had last year, and last year, basically what we had to play with was about $1 billion. $1 billion. That's a paltry sum. But this year we will have about $10 billion to play with, based on the fact that we're doing 1.9 million barrels of crude oil, including about let's say about 400,000 of that is condensate. For those in the oil industry, they understand what I'm speaking to. So that's on the one hand. The year before, or prior to the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu coming in, we were doing probably around 700,000, 800,000 barrels. So there was a quantum leap from that to about 1.3, 1.5, now 1.8, 1.9. I believe, and I see futuristically, that we'll be doing about 2.3 billion. 2.3 million barrels.
The government has 2.06.
Yes.
And people are saying even that 2.06.
Yes. You see, when people say...
with all the challenges.
There are challenges, but the challenges are systemic challenges, which do not disappear overnight. So we need to understand that in everything we do, we need to give government a bit of time. You see, I'm not here batting for government again, but I sit from a position where I can see things holistically. I mean, let me give you a quick example. The central bank governor was at the PEBEC, the PEBEC launch of an initiative just yesterday. And for the first time in a very long time, the central bank governor spoke to many things. And one of the things he spoke to, and which I'm particularly very happy with, is, I mean, let me give you an example. In 2024, we're talking about enhancement of remittance flows. We talked about, around December, about 600 million per month was what came into the country. I mean, all of you talk about dirty December and the likes. I mean, 600 million inflow, Egypt, I think, came in with about 801 billion just in December because of tourism. But that is targeted. But ours was a potpourri of everything. So, to a large extent, I think the central bank governor has been very, very, very deliberate, intentional, and very strategic in the way he has managed the monetary policy affairs of the country. And it was important that he's not at any point yield to the naysayers who are speaking to doom. I'm not saying we're in gloom, but we're not in doom. So I will speak to quickly. Inflation management to a large extent was a bit of a problem. We had food inflation, which was at an all-time high. It was an all-time high based on seasonality of agricultural products particularly. And again, based on the wrong sequencing of the reforms that were announced at the onset of the administration. But you know what? We have moved beyond that.
You're neglecting insecurity.
No, the insecurity that you're speaking to is to a large extent gone.
Because farmers are not going to farms.
I will disagree with you on that. Let me speak to that again. You see, prior to now, we used to have insecurity virtually every day, particularly from the swap and the rest. But in the last 4 or 5 months, let's be frank with ourselves, we did not wake up to a cacophony of, or a staccato of bombs and all that. Don't forget that in the last 1 month, yes, maybe there have been a few reactions.
Not even 1 month, 22 soldiers lost their lives.
Don't get me wrong. In every soldier's life is important. What I'm speaking to here is I'm looking at things based on the holistic manner. I'm not looking at pockets of, that's not what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to the fact that in the last 4 or 5 months, since the resumption of the new DSS chief, I think to a large extent, I don't know. Ajayi, I don't know what has happened. A lot of things seem to have fallen in place. And all of a sudden, we're saying to ourselves, okay, we still have banditry, don't get me wrong, pockets of that. We still have the artisanal miners, who are still trying to cause mayhem. But those ones are a bit of what you can
so
call,
why do we
still
have
bandits.
Food in? Things don't seem to have a ceiling, and that's the challenge Nigerians have. Things keep going, food keeps rising.
I wish I could agree with you, but I don't agree with you on that. You know why?
I go to the market.
No, you go to the market. I'm into agriculture. I can call myself a food security expert. And when I say so with all sense of humility. I run, technically speaking, the largest agribusiness, company in the country. I'm sure you know of a company called Olam, but I'm not here to speak from an Olam-centric.
Don't even call them because you start paying us.
Exactly. I'm not coming, but I'm speaking to the fact that food security. You see, these things are seasonal. So our problem has always been our lack of market access on the one hand, infrastructure on the other hand, and many other things. Strategic grain reserves. I can go on and on, but like I said, I'm not going into agriculture. I want to be a bit more holistic. Let's look at the economy in totality. Let's look at strengthening the banking sector. GDP, 2025, we're looking at probably 4.17%, according to the CBN. Economic growth projections are looking good. But you see, everything is on an arithmetic scale, not on a geometric scale. But you see, we cannot have a quantum leap overnight. There are systemic issues.
Now, you've mentioned the banking sector.
Yes.
Some experts warn that high interest rates and 50% cash reserve ratio is stifling Nigeria's economic growth.
Well, you see, as someone who's worked in the banking sector before now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has, if I can speak to something in specific terms here, I just can't seem to find it. You see, the Central Bank governor at the onset spoke to the fact that he wanted what? Price stability. Okay, price stability is a function of many things. Anytime you do the monetary side, you have to balance it with the fiscal side.
Yeah.
And the fiscal side is where I'm a part of because I sit on the tax committee. And there will be a plethora of reforms we've come up with. When the time is nigh, everybody will see that. So I don't want to get into the politics of it. Because, for me, in God I trust, like I said, everything is data. Let me go into the economics. Yeah. I'm not a politician.
We'll get
and I don't
into
pretend
the
to be
tax.
one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. There's a lot we're doing. And we started with bad sequencing. But that sequencing is now beginning to fall into place because we're looking at things now in a more holistic manner. And to a large extent, like I told you, if you ask the average man, I was speaking to my driver not too long ago, and I asked him, to my doctor actually, and I was asking him what has happened between December and early January. He says, well, prices have come down.
Are you speaking to the right person?
No, I'm speaking my other person.
Doctor.
No, my doctor.
He's an elite.
No, it's not an elite. I'm telling you this.
Your doctor is an elite.
See,
He's not the man on
okay,
the
let me give you an example. The price of rice prior to now was about 110,000. Right now, as we speak, it's gone down to about 70 or 80,000. So what has happened between the last 3 or 4 weeks? It's a supply issue. Everything reacts to demand and supply. So
now let me push you on the tax committee on tax and fiscal reforms. In fact, 2 issues: the fiscal and the tax. There are fiscal sustainability concerns, being elevated, giving debt servicing cost and high fiscal deficit. So, what's your sense?
See, for me, what I mean, if I were you see, in the onset of the program, I spoke to the fact that what we have is a budget estimate. Until the budget is passed before it becomes a budget. Okay, the budget estimates can be tinkered with. Okay, the National Assembly right now, their respective committees are looking into budgetary lines and all that, and looking at what we should prioritize. I spoke at an earlier at an earlier program on your channel, where I spoke about the fact that budgetary provision for agriculture, for example, based on the Malabo Declaration of 2013, speaks to 10% of allocation. But in the last 10 years, we've been allotting between 1.5 and 3.5%. So how do you want to get it right from there? And you see, I've often spoken to the fact that government has no business in business. But again, government has business in business to the extent that government must subsidize production, not consumption. So that is what everyone speaks to.
Production.
Everybody talks about production.
Not consumption.
Not consumption.
And that's why Chikobi is warning that reliance on importation will continue to grow if financing costs remain high for manufacturers.
Yes. As chairman of the industrial group of the LCC, I have 2 issues that I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with the foreign exchange issue, which to a large extent has stabilized. Don't ask me the true value of the naira. I don't know it. And I don't pretend to know it. And anybody who tells you he knows the true value of the naira is either kidding himself. Because the true value of the naira can only be found when there's an equilibrium. And until we find that equilibrium, it's like waiting for Godot.
Isn't that a big issue for our economy?
When you talk about a big issue can only be a big issue when the fundamentals are wrong. The fundamentals are right. But let me go back again. You are speaking to me, you are asking me about the tax
about interest rates for financing.
Yes, financing. Interest rates for financing are on the high side.
Because if manufacturers can manufacture, people will, that's what he was saying, people have to go outside, depend on exports, imports rather. And that will not augur well for the economy.
What we need to do as a country, and I say this with all sense of modesty, is that we must try to walk the talk. Oftentimes we always talk about diversifying the economy, blah, 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 blah. But there's no point in diversifying the economy as if you are going to legislate it. It has to be a strategic, intentional, and deliberate effort to do so. Bank of Industry, for example, which is highly capitalized and I think raised to the tune of maybe 3.3 billion euros or thereabouts some time ago, has come to the rescue. And to a large extent, if you ask the industries, they're getting single-digit interest rates to a large extent. Well, you see, Bank of Industry doesn't lend directly; it lends through the banks. Okay, so that's the medium of lending, and I want to really commend the current MD of the Bank of Industry right now. I think he has his head properly screwed in doing the right thing and not being distracted.
Now,
that's on the one hand.
Okay.
On the other hand, Nigerian Export-Import Bank too is not doing badly. You see, exports are very, very, very important. But you see, you cannot just be exporting raw materials. Okay, you must add value. So people talk about seed to shelf, but you must do value addition. You cannot be producing cassava and yet be importing starch. It's a misnomer. So you must add value. But you see, we must have small concentrations of pockets of positivity. And those pockets of positivity will become a notion of, to a large extent, self-sufficiency.
If we're really focused, because you were talking about managing, somebody was speaking to me about, are we managing our debt, the deficit?
Yes.
Is government really managing that deficit well?
I think, if I were in government's shoes, and I'm not, I'm a private sector person, but at the same time, I sit on the organized private sector side. I will say to government that, you see, this amount, let's assume we free this 8.25 trillion, for example. Let's say we'll cut it to half and say, you know what, guys, we owe you X, but just give us a bit of a moratorium. We're facing a bit of a hard time. But again, another thing that government can do is what you call public-private partnership. There are many things in terms of infrastructure that government can just say, sit to the private sector or public-private partnership for them to do. But I don't know why sometimes government doesn't want to do that. But again, we have about 100 trillion of stranded assets somewhere, idle assets somewhere, which can be freed to do a lot of things. But I'm not going to sit down here and tell the government how they must do their financial
privatization.
Yes.
Selling of assets.
So privatization on the one hand, commercialization, and a bit of a potpourri of all.
Instead of Eurobond.
No, you see, Eurobond thing is not a bad thing. Eurobond thing is something government must have thought through. You see, the monetary authorities and the fiscal authorities are, I think, to a large extent, on a Richter scale of synergy, have probably moved from about 4 to about 8.
All right, because of time. Revenue generation is one major issue that will shape the economy.
Yes.
But the tax reform is hanging.
Yes. When you say the tax reform is hanging, how do you mean?
The governors have agreed.
There's an existing legislation at the National Assembly waiting for, the passage and for presidential assent. We have done our bit. I'm not sitting here.
No. The governors said the VAT.
Yes.
The sharing has to be changed. The formula has to be changed.
But you see, you cannot change the sharing. It's like playing a football game.
That's the only way they agreed.
No. You see, we're in a federation, okay? And during the time we were sitting, we consulted and we went across the geopolitical zones. So there was time for everybody to air their views. But the train left the station, and people are now saying, you know what? Let's get the train back, and let's go in again. No, in my view.
I hope you're not saying that what the governors are saying will not hold water.
You see, it's not for me to say or not for the governors to say. The governors have their opinion, and the people have their opinion as well. The governors represent the people. It's a sovereign, okay? It's a subnational sovereign, in quote. But if the collective sovereign says this is the way we're going, what do? They have their opinion. You see, facts are sacred, opinion is free. Facts are sacred, opinion is free.
Yeah, would have pursued this longer, but let me just...
I think it would be nice for you to pursue this by bringing in the chairman of the tax committee to come and speak to you on that.
No, he's come here sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm sure
he comes regularly.
Yes.
How would rebasing the GDP impact the economy?
Well, you see, rebasing the GDP is just about what you call a bit of, how will I put it?
Because our last rebasing placed us first, but Nigeria today is on fourth, behind South Africa, Egypt, Algeria.
But again,
so what would this rebasing do for
I was in South Africa about a week and a half ago, and I think I don't tweet, so I'm someone who doesn't tweet because what I want to say is just too short for the tweet. Is it tweet now, or what do they call it now?
X.
They call it X, okay. If they call it X, I might call myself Y. It's just a lighter note. So what I do is that I woke up to a few South African friends telling me that, we had moved up on the GDP rebasing thing to, I can't quite remember the figure now, but we're number 1 and South Africa was number 2, and South Africans are telling me that it's a good time to be in Nigeria, and I smiled and I said, okay, fine. But
I hope that the people who are talking to you are following the trends, because this is just new.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, only two West African countries, Nigeria and Senegal,
yes.
got into the 10,
yes.
where South Africa is first,
Yes.
Egypt is second,
Algeria.
and Algeria is the last.
Yes.
All right, we're going to have to leave it here because of time. I would have had to chip in one or two more,
Yes.
But thank you so much. Adefeko, Leg Group, let me just get this right, Chairman, Industrial Group, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Member, Presidential Committee on Tax and Fiscal Reforms, and PRO Nasima. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to coming again.
All right. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.